LinkedIn presents.
Is hypervigilance helping or hurting your career? I'm Maura Aarons-Mele, and this is The Anxious Achiever, the show that looks at the intersection of mental health and work and asks, how can we do both better?
Forward thinkers know that when people thrive, organizations thrive. This is the future of work. This is Workday, the AI platform that elevates humans.
Did you know that small and medium businesses make up 98% of the global economy, but most B2B marketers still treat them as a one-size-fits-all? LinkedIn's Meet the SMB report reveals why that's a missed opportunity and how you can reach these fast-moving decision makers effectively. Learn more at linkedin.com/meet-the-SMB.
So I want to take you back to me at about 10 years old in the 1980s, growing up in the New York metropolitan area. My parents going through a nasty separation and not speaking to each other. And so in order to facilitate visiting between my mom and my dad for me and my sister, they would put us on public transportation to get from my mom's house in New Jersey to my dad's in New York. And, this was the age of the after-school special and stranger danger and stories abounding of kids getting nabbed off the street. We didn't have cell phones back then. I was an anxious kid. I felt like I was in charge of my little sister. And so I remember those journeys between my mom and my dad's as ones of sitting in a state of constant hypervigilance, scanning the environment for threats. Were we on the right bus route? Were we going to get there safely? Was the driver acting weird? Why was my mom late picking us up at Grand Central Station? Constantly imagining the worst case scenarios and scanning for threats. And, this is a habit I kept. Sometimes I still have it today, especially when I'm triggered. A lot of high performers are hypervigilant. And the thing that's tricky is we get rewarded for it. I talk to lawyers sometimes and they're like, my job is to scan the environment for threats, right? That's a lot of what we do at work, and it's actually a great skill. But that kind of sustained anxiety level can have a huge negative impact on our health. And you know what? It's not great when you're a leader. You're constantly anticipating the worst. You're making everyone anxious. And sometimes, you know what? Good things happen too. Tanvi Gautam is our guest today. She's an executive coach and managing director of Leadershift Inc. And she's here to share the ways she's coached her clients through the hurdles of hypervigilance. But to start, she explains how she came to notice hypervigilant patterns in the work world in the first place.
So it happened because of the executive coaching clients that I was working with. A lot of them happen to be high potential leaders. And more often than not, there is probably just a little something that we're trying to fine tune with these leaders. And sometimes when I was giving them advice around things they need to think about before they react to a situation, which is a high stakes, high pressure situation, because as we know, this concept of executive presence is extremely important when you're kind of heading to the C-suite. And any of the advice that I would give them, they would get it. But when the moment of stress came around, it was like we never had a conversation at all. And they would come back and they would tell me, I said, I knew I should have done this. It's almost as though I couldn't help it. And then very quickly they would pivot from how they should have responded to amplifying the way they noticed what was the said as well as the unsaid component of the situation that they were in. And they became hyper fixated on that almost. And that's when I kind of realized, I said, this is not just another person trying to keep their composure in a high stakes situation. There is something more going on. And as I started noticing this pattern, I realized what it really was hypervigilance. And the way to combat hypervigilance was not going to be by a set of strategies of just intellectually thinking about it, but you had to go a little bit deeper
And go where?
to start thinking about why is it that your brain ends up reading the scenario in a way that isn't entirely accurate.
Hmm.
So the same situation, if you and I were sitting there, Maura, we may end up having a very different interpretation of what the other person just said or what the other person just asked for versus the kind of reading that was happening with the individuals that were hypervigilance, which was almost always classifying a situation as one of threat
Yes.
or looking at it with suspicion or reading more between the lines. So, I have some leaders who have to mind to read between the lines because they take everything quite literally. But then there are others, and that is the hypervigilant group, which is so on alert
Right.
that they are creating this entire narrative that may or may not be there.
Right. They're scanning.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the word I coined for these individuals, where their brain is scanning the environment for threats, real or imagined. And look, hypervigilance it's not a bad thing, right? We have to be hypervigilant because we want to keep ourselves safe. It's a normal
Hmm.
human reaction. But with the scanners, it's this constant state of watchfulness that is almost a loop that plays in the background. Think of it as background music, when you're standing in
Hmm.
the elevator and you're checking your phone, etc., but there's this background music. It's like that background music that they may not even be aware of, and that music doesn't shut off.
Right. The app
Uh,
is still running and it's draining the
yes,
battery.
yes, that's a great analogy. Yeah, yeah.
It must be challenging to be working with a leader and to say to them, "Hey, do you know that you're constantly scanning the environment for threats?" Like how do you introduce this
Mm,
concept
mm,
to
mm,
them if
mm.
it's not something they understand that they do?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, a couple of things. One is that, when I do executive coaching, I never just focus on the immediate scenario that they may be sent to me for, right? Like so
Mm-hmm.
and so needs to speak up a little bit more when they're in the boardroom, or so and so needs to be more collaborative, because that's kind of the end outcome, but that's not what is really going on. So part of the conversation always is me trying to figure out like what has been their journey up until this point in time. And it's really interesting when you start getting into what were the life experiences that have shaped this person. What is the culture that they come from? What are the countries that they come from? A lot of my clients are multicultural. And that can tell you a lot about the influences, whether they were societal influences, or they were influences from the family, or they were influences of circumstances. So having that information helps
Right.
because it creates a certain level of personal connection and psychological safety to bring it up. So that's one. It's hard to bring it up if one doesn't have that level of psychological safety with the person. But my favorite technique for doing it is to kind of gently invite the person to say, okay, that's one way we could definitely think about this. Now imagine if your favorite person in the world had just said that to you, how might you think about it then? And say, oh, well, if it was Mary or it was Ravi or whoever, I think they might be saying this because of ABC, and that's a much more generous interpretation. It's a much more, what we say in the corporate world, cutting them a wider arc in terms of what they might be saying. And the thing about coaching these individuals is that the moment you open up an alternate reality for them to see, it immediately relaxes the nervous system because you're like,
Wow.
yeah. just maybe there indeed is another way to think about it. And look, no one likes to be hypervigilant. It's a very stressful state of being.
It's a habit, though. It's a habit. I mean, how do you help them unlock what's probably a habit they may have had since childhood?
Yeah, well, one is it has to be a multi-pronged approach. One is, of course, just naming and noticing it. I mean, when the article came out in Harvard Business Review, I actually had a few people write to me. One of them was a CEO. He said, this is something I've been doing always, and I never had a term for it. So I just realized that this is what it is. So, like many things, naming it is the first step in being able to work with it. So you've noticed it, but you really don't know what to call it. And then it's a very gentle unwinding of, well, why did my brain end up with this framing? Because that's what it is. It's a frame. Why is it my, first go-to frame? And then a lot of it is processing the emotions that comes with recognizing it, because it requires a huge deal of compassion towards oneself. The recognition that it's not like something that you sometimes can help. It's just a learned pattern, because you probably developed hypervigilance many times, not always, many times, as a coping mechanism for the environment that you were in. Now, it helped you cope with that environment, but that environment has changed. And helping your body and your nervous system understand that can take a while.
Do you use any modalities? I know you're not a therapist, you're a coach, but
Mm-hmm.
do you use any modalities that help them literally change their nervous system in the room? You started off talking about this, how people go into the room with a great plan, but then it all disintegrates when they're in the room.
Yeah. So I am familiar with somatic therapy, even though I'm not a somatic therapist. And somatic therapy has a lot of what I would call in the moment hacks that you don't have to be a therapist to do it. I think these are hacks that if you were to even just go to the internet and look for them, or look for them on YouTube, you have therapists who are talking about it, because it's amazing how, our bodies are a source of intelligence that we just don't tap into enough. And there are things that you can do in the moment that slow down your nervous system response so that it's not as jumpy as it is. Because another way of talking about hypervigilance is just being in this jumpy state, right?
Yeah.
That, okay, something's happened and I don't think it's safe. And I'm like, all right, let's just take a breath. Let's just take a breath. Some of it is, sometimes it can be as minor as having a dab of lemongrass essential oil on your wrist
Hmm.
or on your finger, because the olfactory sense has a very quick way of reaching our nervous system, and it keeps the system regulated in the moment. And no one sees it, right? It may be on just your fingertip, or it may be on your wrist, and you very casually have your finger close to your nose or something. Those are just ways in which you can resource yourself in a situation so that you slow yourself down before you respond. There are also practices from the slower ways of moving the body, such as qigong, which is this Eastern way of moving the body, trying to harness the energy that is around you. Because the ultimate thing that you're trying to do is, it's like a speeding train about to crash into something, and you're trying to pull levers to slow it down.
Slow the train.
Yeah, slow the train down, and you have to do it at the bodily level, at the nervous system level. And so whether it's cues, right? I write about this in the article about this client of mine who, supremely technically brilliant woman, being invited to lead into strategic conversations, but just seeing the entire Q&A that follows the conversation as a combat zone. Like, they're here to show me I'm not good enough. They're going to ask me something I don't know something about, etc., etc. And then we had to create a little, almost like a mantra or a reframe where we started saying, okay, Q&A is not about proving. It's about improving. Here's somebody else in the room who's asking a question that might help me think about something I hadn't thought about. Now, if you come at it from, oh, this person is trying to help me, that's a very different frame from, here's this person who's out to get me. Right. And then I hear some pushback sometimes like, oh, no, you don't know this guy, or you don't know this woman. She is really out to get me. I'm not being hypervigilant. That's just who she is. I'm like, great, okay, fine. Let me assume this is the most toxic person you've ever met in your life, and that they truly are out to get you. So this is not hypervigilance. This is just fact check. Okay, good. Now, this means that to respond to this person, you have to be in your center. You have to be able to think broader, more creatively, in a more relaxed manner than you ever would. And in order to do that, you will still need to calm down your nervous system. So whether it is hypervigilance or it is truly the other person being toxic, the tools that you would use and the path that you would take is still the same, which is maintain your center. Imagine if it's necessary. Just imagine if it's necessary, because it allows you to free up mental, emotional, physical resources for you to respond in the moment. And that's what you are trying to do.
I think you also talk about the use of sort of asking questions.
Mm.
Is that a tool to get you into your center, or what's that a tool for?
So essentially, it's a tool for buying time. Right?
Yes, slowing down time.
It's buying time. So, like, what do you mean? Sorry, could you clarify?
Yeah.
And chances are the person will end up, and people love to talk more often than not. They like the sound of their own voice. So they may end up saying something that actually allows you that little extra breath that you needed so that you don't have a knee-jerk reaction. Or there are questions which are called perspective shifting questions, which instead of, in listening to a question and saying, how am I going to respond to this? Let's try and understand, why is this important to the other person? Focus on them, because the more you focus on you, your hypervigilance is likely to go up. Because
Right, your anxiety just will increase. Yes.
Yes. But, you're a parent, I'm a parent. It's like we have these kids who come in, they'll, come from the playground, they fell down, they have a cut, they're bleeding, etc. And in that moment, I'm pretty sure you have had this experience. I think most parents have had this experience. No matter how panicked we are about that gaping, cut on the forehead which just missed the eye, we go into, where's the ice? Do we need to go to see the doctor? Let's clean the wound, etc. Our own anxieties have nothing to do with anything in that moment, because we have become so fixated on helping this other person. And so we are able to perform, if I can call it that, or attend to what is in front of us versus what is inside us. And so that act of perspective taking is shifting the energy to the other person, which then frees up resources that are consumed when we are being hypervigilant, or how am I showing up? How am I going to show up? I hope I don't fail. I hope I don't get this wrong. What if I say something I shouldn't have? That entire thing is shut down for a moment, because we are now fixated, and maybe even hyperfixated, on helping the other person.
That's
So,
right.
So
we're in the moment too, because
yes.
hypervigilance, you're in the future.
Yes.
And it brings us back to the moment.
Yeah. And then there is the intent checking question, which those are the ones that are my favorite, right? Because, sometimes somebody will say something and they will say it in a way that makes you feel like you're not the smartest person in the room. Now, was that really their intent? And this one takes a little bit of courage, but sometimes, and it's a little bit easier if it's on one-on-one. But saying something like, when you asked that question, I felt like I really am not thinking about this enough. It made me feel quite terrible. Is that where you wanted us to land? Or and chances are the other person's like, no, 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 that's not where I was going. That's not the idea is not to make you feel bad or something. I just wanted to draw your attention to this or that. Sometimes it's just naming it. Because you may be hypervigilant, but the other person, you don't know where they are coming from. And that's another whole part of this whole hypervigilant conversation, right?
Mm.
Because you don't know where the other person is coming from. So I'll tell you a story. I had a meeting with the CEO, and it took a while to get that meeting, and we had all of 15 minutes because, well, that's all he had. And during the meeting, he kept side glancing at his watch. Now, what do you think is happening in the mind of someone who's sitting with this
You
CEO
feel
in a half?
terrible.
You feel terrible. You're like, okay, clearly I don't make sense. He doesn't want to listen to me. He has somewhere else to go. And then it can spiral out of control depending on your hypervigilance. I really shouldn't have been here. I don't belong in the C-suite. My mom was right. I should have. My sixth grade teacher was right. It's a spiral, right? So I'm sitting there and I've noticed this thing a couple of times. And that's when I ask an intent checking question. And I said, if you don't mind my asking, I've just noticed that you've checked your watch a couple of times. If this is not a good time, I can come back.
Mhm.
And he just paused and he looked at me and he said, no, you're right. The thing is that my wife has had a medical scare and the reports are going to be coming around very soon. And I am just a little bit concerned. So I've been looking at the watch, saying, what time is that call? But you have my full attention for the next 15 minutes.
Mm.
So it wasn't about me. It wasn't
Mm-mm.
about that I belong in the C-suite or am I making sense that he doesn't like me and da 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 da. Just check the intent. And it's acknowledging the other person in the moment too. He was dealing with something that was extremely stressful. I would have been looking at the time if I was in
Of
his place.
course. Oh, wow. Right, because we never, and those of us who are anxious, we love to imagine the worst case scenario on our counterpart. Of course we do.
Yes. Yes. So, you know, uh, just check in with them.
Forward thinkers know that when people thrive, organizations thrive. That's why you need a platform that paves the way for people to be at their best. Workday is your partner to unleash the full potential of your human and digital workforce. This is the future of work. This is Workday, the AI platform that elevates humans.
Small and medium businesses don't have time to waste, and neither do marketers trying to reach them. On LinkedIn, more SMB decision makers are actively looking for new solutions to help them grow, whether it's software or financial services. Our Meet the SMB report breaks down how these businesses buy and what really influences their choices. Learn more at linkedin.com/meet-the-SMB. That's linkedin.com/meet-the-SMB.
I wondered if you had any words of advice or thoughts for those of us listening who run a little bit more anxious, and have that tendency to freeze in the big moment. What are some things we can start working on?
I'm a listener of your podcast, and those people who listen to your podcast would have heard this word many times, which is resourcing.
Yes.
The greater you are resourced, there's a famous saying: the more you prepare before the battle, the less you bleed in war. And
Wow.
what it really is trying to tell you is that the more resourced you can be before you are in the moment, the greater your ability to pull upon those resources, the longer the runway for you to hit that wall. So let's assume that previously you would freeze like within a minute of a question or 30 seconds. Can we elongate that pathway to 2 minutes, to 3 minutes, to 5 minutes because you're better resourced? And then to a point where you don't do it at all because it's a process. It's not something that happens like it's not that your nervous system is so used to it. You're trying to undo years and years and years of conditioning. And it is going to take time. So that's recognizing first that it's going to take time. So take the small win, right? If you did the first question really great and the second question you fumbled, well, that's a victory, right? You had got the first question great. So that's one. And then I also think that sometimes it helps to have an ally if you have somebody uh, in the room who knows that this can tend to happen. And if you can have that kind of an ally, then for them to step in the moment with just a very gentle nudge, saying, actually, that's a great question. And, Maura, you remember the time we were talking about, how the sales team, do you want to tell them about that one? Because that was so good, right? And it looks like such a casual conversation, but what this person is really doing is just giving you that gentle, squeeze of a hand that allows you to go on. So sometimes I work so much with high performing women as well, who sometimes like all high performing women and men, can doubt themselves. I don't know if I can do this. And I always tell them, I said, sometimes when you don't have faith in yourself, borrow it from someone who does. It's that allyship in the room, that can help you. And please don't be afraid of saying, that's a great question. Can you give me a moment? I want to kind of collect my thoughts because it's very important that I answer this completely. People actually respect you for that.
Yes. Yes.
And I feel like, and this is one of the things we talk about people heading to the C-suite. One of the signs of people who actually have true power is that they're not afraid to take up space. And by space, I don't mean just physical space. It's also being able to take your time, pause.
Well, and I think the other thing is that ironically, they are also able to say when they don't know or they're not sure. I mean, that's
a
a
big
really
one.
really powerful, scary, but powerful.
That's a big one. I can't tell you, because I work with so many leaders across so many industries. I work with very senior leadership teams. There is no way I have an answer to that. This is what I tell them in the coaching session too. There is no way I have an answer to everything that they're talking about. It's not possible. It's humanly not possible, right? And the idea is not to have the right answer. The idea is to have an opinion and not being afraid to change your opinion if needed, because information keeps changing. I mean, let's take the example of the pandemic, right? So we began the pandemic with, oh, you don't have to wear a mask because only people who are sick, they should be wearing a mask. And as new data came in, we realized, no, this thing, it can be asymptomatic. Somebody could be carrying the virus and not know it. And so you wore a mask, not just to protect yourself, but to protect the other person. Now, we didn't have that data, did we? And we live in a world of disruption. Senior leadership teams are constantly dealing with a scenario where the sands are shifting. You wake up every morning to this new mandate, this new, geopolitical situation, whatever else. It's a shifting landscape. If you get fixated on what's the right answer, well, I'm sorry, but there isn't a right answer. And that understanding that also then enables you to relax in the moment and say, it's not about the right answer. It's about, how would I frame this? What's my opinion on it? And having the humility to be able to change your mind. And so begin by, here's how I'm thinking about this right now. And sure, I could change how I was thinking about it 20 minutes from now. But here's how I'm thinking about this right now. Or based on what I know, and there may be things I don't know. Or if nothing else, and this is another time buying tactic, I would love to share my thoughts. I just want to get a sense of where everybody else is in the room. So could I check in with some of you on how you think about this? Which then allows you to kind of frame your own thinking, buying time. Again, it's like bringing this child at the edge of the cliff gently back so that, you can formulate a response that is grounded in a greater state of, equanimity than hypervigilance. And let's face it, all this stuff, I'm sure your listeners are hearing this, and some of them might take a strategy or two and they may try it, and it turns out it didn't work. And that's okay. Because a big part of people who are hypervigilant is what they do to themselves after the moment is over.
Yes. Not kind to themselves.
No, that rumination, that, telling every single person you meet, from your, coworker to your friend to the checkout person to the Uber driver to your child to your cat, you won't believe what happened to me today. And I get it, because you're trying to process it. You're trying to process it. But here's the thing, repeating it constantly is not processing it, it's actually reinforcing it. So it's kind of counterintuitive. And so you have to sit with that. And sometimes I tell them, I said, all right, set a timer. Just for the next 10 minutes, this is all you're going to talk about. And when you're done talking about it, every time it comes up, you will tell yourself, yes, I froze, and I give myself grace. Yes, this happened, or I responded in a way that was suboptimal, and I give myself grace. And that act of giving yourself grace and recognizing that your inherent worth as a human being is not tied up to what you did in a presentation in a moment in time is so important, because we are worthy of loving ourselves, and we are valuable. It's like Brené Brown says, you were born with worth, and you have inherent value from the moment you were born. You didn't have to perfect and perform and please to have that value. And so going back to that, and literally just, placing two hands on your heart and saying, and that's, or whatever is the phrase that works for you, is so important, because that's also a way of resourcing yourself and training your nervous system, saying, yep, sure, you are allowed to get it wrong. The world goes on, the world is it's and you come back home and you're talking to a loved one, or you're sitting with your pet, and they think they still think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, irrespective of whether you froze or not. Focus on that.
When I go on stage and I'm feeling really anxious, I just say, remember, everyone back home loves you, even if you
Yes.
bomb.
Yeah. This is interesting you said that, because, I and I've been doing keynotes for more than 2 decades, and you won't believe this. Every time before I go up on stage, if someone came and touched my hands, they are ice cold. And I tell myself, this is not me feeling nervous. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with feeling nervous, because, it actually can help performance. But I tell myself, this is the surge of energy that is going to allow me to bring my message even more powerfully to serve the people who are here to listen to me. Let's channel that energy versus trying to, oh my God, I'm nervous. My hands are cold. What am I going to do? What if I fail? And here's such a counterintuitive one, Maura. I've never told anyone this before, but I'm going to share this with you.
Tell me.
Sometimes I tell myself, you know what? Go ahead, make a mess. Go ahead, make a mess. Go ahead, do the worst keynote of your life, mess everything up. And this is kind of like my higher self talking to me. And I will be standing right here by the side of the stage to hold your hand and love you still if you made the biggest mess of your life. Here's your permission slip. Now go. And I tell you, I don't know. There is just something about go ahead, make a mess. And touch wood, so far it hasn't happened. If something has happened, I've been able to kind of, find my step. And the audience doesn't know in any case. You're the one who knows your speech.
Know.
So
they want you to do well. I love that.
Yeah.
That's it for this episode of The Anxious Achiever. The show is produced and edited by Mary Dew, with production support and sound engineering by Nick Krinko. If you like what you heard, head to your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review. It really matters, and we appreciate the time and effort it takes. And if you don't subscribe or follow the show already, now's the time. And let us know what you'd like to hear more of. I get some of my best ideas from my listeners, so find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. You can find my weekly newsletter there as well. A big thanks to LinkedIn and all the listeners out there and our guests in the anxious achiever world. Until next time.